Hey guys, a video for a nature and environment in Japan playlist. This time of year in Japan, this is pretty much what the weather map looks like every day for about 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, just about every day. Heavy, constant rain. Occasionally it stops or eases off a bit, but it's fairly constant. Just incredible quantities of water. We heard recently something about the water flows out the rivers in huge quantities and brings the sea temperature up around Japan by a couple of degrees, which increases the rainfall. So it's sort of like a cycle, and then the rain falls more, and then it goes out in the sea, warms the sea up, and then more falls. And don't know if that's the actual explanation for it, but it's just incredible how much water falls, and it just never stops, you know. So there's two issues Japan has to deal with. One is flood mitigation to try and reduce the flooding. The other one is irrigation, because of course after the rain stops, the rainy season stops, we have to be able to irrigate the rice fields, and they take a lot of water. So what we're looking up there, that is actually a river up there. Up higher than we are is a river up there, and that's a gate there to control the flow of the water from that river. So we're below that level. We're down in a floodplain here. And here's another river at a lower level. And this is something you see in Japan quite a lot. You'll see two rivers or two bodies of water at different heights, which is a little bit unusual because usually you don't, do you? Usually it all balances out and they end up the same height. But due to dikes and other sorts of man-made systems, floodgates and so on, they control it. And the result is you've got different bodies of water at different heights, and big gates like that control the water flow. So obviously if it was let go, where we're standing down here would be under a few meters of water. So it's quite fascinating when you travel around Japan, you see a lot of this. There's a fairly old one with an old tunnel there, feeding the water down. And again, it's sort of like an aqueduct, because it's actually above the level of the natural river, because they need to get it up. They need to get it up higher than the rice fields, so that then they can gravity feed water into all the rice fields, huge quantities of water. So we've got this sort of an aqueduct up here, and then at a lower level down there we have a lake. Down there. So it's pretty amazing because Japan's a fairly mountainous and hilly place, so these systems are just all over the place. And they always need to have these reservoirs up above the rice fields. So some of you would have recognised some of these scenes, some of these big reservoirs, big lakes, man-made lakes, and the water we've showed you just as backgrounds in previous videos. Often connected with wildlife, because around these things, often lots of trees, lots of wildlife, really good little reserves, little nature reserves, as well as being water reservoirs. So there's actually a second reservoir up above there, quite a few meters higher, that feeds down. The overflow from that feeds down into this reservoir. And when this overflows, it goes down there, and then off it goes to a lower reservoir. And all of this system is actually above the level of the local rice fields. So it can gravity feed the rice fields. Because as you can imagine, the rice fields take huge quantities of water because they fill them up like swimming pools. We've showed you that before. So obviously this time of year they don't need to feed the rice fields terribly much because nature's doing a pretty good job of that itself. But when the rain does stop, then it's all about these reservoirs then. So some of you might recognise that scene. We've done a few videos with that as the background. You might recognise that scene from a couple of the talking videos, the chat videos. But what you wouldn't have seen in that video is the overflow from that, which is down here, like a spillway. You can see it's raining at the time too. It's fairly consistent. That flows down here, under there. down here, and this one does end up out in the ocean. This is actually overflow, so that's water that they're not using. It's just overflow from the reservoir, and off it goes out into the ocean. So it's interesting when you travel around Japan. You'll see lots of this. You'll see a river that's higher than the land around it, and quite often big rivers that are higher than big towns. And that's why this time of year too, you will hear stories about flooding in Japan causing damage, because it does happen sometimes. Anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.